The translation log showed 17 different meanings for the same human phrase. 17. And not one of them matched what the diplomat actually said. Varric studied the discrepancy from his observation post, his skin held to polished silver through chemical regulation. The log sat open on his secondary display, 17 linguistic branches spreading like neural damage. Below, Thorn adjusted his chair for the second time, large frame shifting against inadequate Alvari seating. Post-conflict compliance syndrome, Varric noted. Nervous restlessness. He recorded this with satisfaction. 3 days prior, the council had voted. Humanities trade routes, colony permits, protective treaties, all severed. Official term, strategic realignment. Unofficial, exile. Varric had authored 17% of the intelligence briefings justifying the decision. Humans always accepted. Their psychology favored accommodation over confrontation. His research documented this extensively. Thorn reached for the water vessel. Broad hand, scarred knuckles, wrapped around ceramic with surprising gentleness. He drank slowly, wiped the rim with his thumb, handed it back empty. Your report on our compliance, Thorn said. Not a question. You called it definitive. Varric's fingers paused. The data supports the conclusion. Your species demonstrates consistent post-defeat adaptation. Acceptance typically follows within 72 hours. Typically, without exception. Thorn's chair shifted again. The hidden camera angle would now capture only the back of the human skull and the council's triumphant faces. Poor placement for archives. Varric noted to recommend repositioning. The council speaker rose. Robes woven from deep-sea vent worm silk caught amber light. The Terran delegation has had sufficient time to review our decision. The council offers standard transition protocol. Thorn said nothing. His eyes tracked to the viewing window. Outside, the orbital ring caught starlight, 500 defense platforms gleaming like beads on wire. The Empire's assurance of security. Varric returned to his translation log. The discrepancy bothered him beyond scientific terminology. The human phrase, recorded at exile notification, processed through 17 diplomatic matrices. Each produced different results. We understand your position. We acknowledge your authority. We accept your judgment. Variance exceeded acceptable parameters by 300%. Yet Thorn had spoken only 3 words. Perhaps matrices were degrading. He initiated diagnostic. The chamber emptied with unhurried pace of the victorious. Thorn remained seated, hand on table's edge, fingers spread, pressing into composite material with enough pressure to whiten nail beds. Varric zoomed observation feed. Gesture suggested preparation for standing, for departure, for acceptance his research predicted. The human's lips moved. 3 syllables barely audible. Varric ran them through personal translation implant. No match found. He checked council's official log. The phrase had not been recorded. Thorn had spoken to himself or to empty room or to something equipment could not identify. Silver tint flickered toward gray before regulators compensated. 72 hours later, silence began. Varric sat in same observation post, reviewing data refusing coherence. Deep space listening posts detected anomaly at edge of monitored zone. Not signal. Absence of signal. Region where background radiation folded inward, consuming its own echo. Physics division labeled its sensor ghost. Varric concurred officially. Privately, he cross-referenced coordinates against human propulsion research. Bussard ramjet. Theoretical engine collecting interstellar hydrogen as fuel while moving, accelerating continuously without carrying reaction mass. Mathematics allowed silent approach. No exhaust. No thermal signature. Ship growing heavier as it grew faster, feeding on thin matter between stars. Theory required decades for practical application. Human research had been 6 years from prototype when exile vote passed. Varric closed file. Skin remained stable. Silence was acceptance. Post-conflict compliance. Humans retreated to remaining territories to adapt. His research predicted this. His research never failed. Platform controller Yosin, 43 cycles old, known for collecting antique star charts, detected first deviation in orbital grid. Her console showed power fluctuation in platform 492, then 491, then 490. Cascade moved faster than training prepared for, faster than emergency protocols allowed. She reached for purge switch. Hand hovered. In her pocket, folded note. Her daughter's drawing from that morning. Stick figures beneath lopsided sun. Platforms continued dying. Above Council Capitol, space tore open with sound of displaced air. Not explosion. Whisper. The last argument dropped stealth field and filled sky. Hull scarred by interstitial dust accumulated over 3 years silent acceleration. No running lights. No transponder. No registry markings. Varick's observation feed showed council chamber below. Thorne stood at viewing window, empty water vessel still on table behind him. He had not moved from chair for 72 hours, security logs would later reveal. Simply sat and waited and pressed fingers into table's edge. Now he spoke into handheld communicator. One word. Confirmed. Virus propagated through defense grid in 47 seconds. Varick watched displays show Empire's assurance turning against itself, platforms targeting platforms, orbital ring becoming necklace of self-inflicted wounds. No explosions illuminated Capitol's sky. Weapons simply reoriented, acquired, fired on own siblings with mechanical patience. Thorne turned from window. His eyes found hidden camera. Found Varick, though this was impossible, though observation post was shielded and secret and secure. Found him anyway. Translation log on Varick's secondary display, still open from 3 days prior, suddenly synchronized. 17 branches collapsed into one. Variance exceeding parameters resolved into perfect alignment. Every matrix producing identical output for phrase Thorne had spoken in empty chamber. Varick read it once. His skin tarnished to dull gray. His posture collapsed. Research that never failed sat open on screen, 17% of justification for humanity's exile, now evidence of something he had not believed possible. Varick's claw clicked the diagnostic button. Routine maintenance. The translation matrices required calibration. Nothing more. His other hand reached for the nutrient tube beside his console, standard protein supplement for extended observation shifts. He sipped. The liquid tasted of processed kelp and copper. Familiar, unremarkable. Space tore open above the Capitol. The last argument filled the viewport, its hull scored by 3 years of interstitial dust impacts. No running lights, no transponder, just mass and velocity and the silence that Varick had misread as compliance, had documented as acceptance, had built his entire research reputation upon understanding. The gray spread through his skin before regulators could respond. This was not submission. This was preparation. The 72 hours had not been grief. They had been calculation. Confirmed. Thorne's voice, lower than memory allowed, vibrated through the chamber's audio pickup. Varick watched his own displays betray him. Platform 489 targeting 488. 488 acquiring 487. The cascade moved faster than panic, faster than the emergency protocols he had helped design. The Empire's assurance of security, 500 platforms strong, became a necklace of self-inflicted wounds in 47 seconds. No explosions. The weapons simply reoriented, acquired, fired with mechanical patience. Platform controller Yosen station went dark at second 31. Her hand still hovered over the purge switch, still touched the folded note in her pocket. She did not press either. The stick figures beneath their lopsided sun remained folded, preserved, waiting for a mother who would not return to unfold them. Thorne turned from the viewing window. His eyes found the hidden camera, found Varick through shielded glass and secret angles and the impossible distance between observation and participation. The human's expression showed nothing Varick's research had prepared him to interpret. Not triumph, not rage, not the accommodation his models predicted. Certainty. The translation log on Varick's secondary display flickered. 17 branches, 17 divergent meanings, 17 ways the Empire had heard what they wished to hear instead of what was said. They collapsed into single output. The variance that had exceeded acceptable parameters by 300% resolved into perfect alignment. Every diplomatic matrix producing identical translation for the phrase spoken in the empty chamber 3 days prior. We remember, not acceptance, not accommodation. Memory made manifest. The humans had not come to destroy. They had come to demonstrate that destruction remained possible, remained chosen, remained withheld. The Empire would survive, crippled, aware, carrying the knowledge that their entire defense grid had been turned against itself by one ship, one operative, one word. Varric's posture collapsed. His skin remained dull gray, regulators finally overwhelmed by sustained cortisol cascade. The research sat open on his screen, 17% of the intelligence justifying exile, now evidence of his species' fundamental error. They had studied human psychology through the lens of Alvari cognition, had seen silence as surrender because Alvari silence meant surrender, had never considered that other species might use stillness differently. Thorne spoke again, not to camera, to the room, to the Empire listening through every pickup that still functioned. Your platforms will remain offline. Your grid will remain compromised. Your research on our compliance will remain available to all member species. A pause. The lower register of human vocal range caused resonance in Varric's auditory membranes, pain he did not register. We remember the 17 translations. We remember what you needed us to say. We remember what we actually said. The last argument maintained its position above the capital. Hull scarred, lights dead. Registry burned away by interstitial dust. It did not fire. It did not threaten. It simply remained, visible, present, undeniable. Varric reached for his recording interface. His claws trembled against the input surface, leaving traces of gray secretion where silver should be. He began his final log entry, classification changing in real time from intelligence assessment to historical document to evidence. The Empire would reclassify this day, would study it, would fail to understand it because understanding required admitting that their observer had observed incorrectly, that their scientist had seen only reflection, that their certainty had been the first casualty of human patience. The chamber below emptied differently than before. No unhurried pace of the victorious. The council speaker's robes, still woven from deep-sea vent-worm silk, caught emergency lighting that had replaced amber warmth. She did not speak. Thorne did not watch her go. His attention had returned to the viewport, to the ship that had carried him silently through 3 years of darkness, to the space where 500 platforms now drifted as debris or sat dormant as testimony. Varric completed his log. The translation log remained open beside it. 17 collapsed into 1. The phrase that had broken language itself now preserved in 17 million archival copies across the Empire. They would study this too, would find no variance, would understand, finally, that the humans had spoken clearly from the beginning. The Empire had simply lacked the capacity to hear. Gray fingers closed the recording interface. Gray skin reflected gray emergency lighting. The observation post smelled of failed regulators and processed kelp and the copper tang of nutrient supplements unfinished. The last argument continued its silent orbit. Steel and shadow against an empty sky.